It's hosted by our partner TIS from Portugal. And for those who do not know me, my name is Marjolein Salens. I work for the Port of Antwerp, and we are the coordinator of the ePIcenter project. As I said, we have quite a full agenda for the next 1.5 hours, but maybe first just a couple of practical things. So this session will be recorded and it will be used afterwards as educational material for the project. And secondly, we are very much welcoming your input and your comments and your questions, but we would like to ask you to add them to the chat, and we will pick up on them at the Q&A round at the end of this meeting. So first of all, let me just give you a short introduction on our project, some project facts. The ePIcenter project is a Horizon 2020 project, which has 36 partners within Europe, but also beyond. We also have a couple of much valued international partners as well. We started in June 2020 and we will end the project in November 2023. So we're now actually at month 19 of the project. How does our project work, or where do we start from our project? So it starts from the challenges that the supply chain sector is facing today. It's a VUCA world. We see that a lot of things, unexpected events, geopolitics have a big impact on the logistics operation. And unfortunately, we also notice that we are not always so able to react very fast on these changing events or on this changing reality. So the question is, how can we better cope with these unexpected events? How can we face this complex reality and the logistic sector who is operating in it? So luckily, there are not only challenges, but there's also a lot of opportunities that we can use to deal with this. And within ePIcenter, we try to focus on making the supply chain operations more transparent, more efficient, and more greener. How do we do this? We work in several fields, which are mentioned here. So the first one is working on transparency, on visibility of the supply chain operations. And how do we do this? We do this by trying to unlock real-time information into a digital data layer on top of the physical infrastructure, so that we can better know, like, where are our shipments? What's the status of our shipments? What is happening with them? And often this data about it does exist, but it's not accurate, or it's disclosed only to a certain amount of parties, or it's in the wrong format. And so this work package really tries to focus on collecting this data, sharing this data, unlocking this to a broad variety of players, but to do this in a safe way as well, and based on clear and secure governance rules. So, okay, if you imagine that in a perfect world, you already have this data, and so you have a good view on your shipment, on your cargo, on its status, but suddenly something happens, an unexpected event, a delay in a certain leg, a strike is causing capacity issues in a certain logistic hub. How can you quickly replan or reschedule your shipment? And so, although in the best case, you already have this data and the possibilities in front of you, still, this is a very complex calculation that you need to do, and you need to do it very fast. So this work package works on the creation of this kind of this real-time synchro-model algorithms that allow this rescheduling and this rerouting take place in a fast way and based on parameters such as cost, speed, but also environmental benefits. Another item that we work on is new transport technologies. Here we look at how can Hyperloop or automated electric vehicles or modular containers be integrated in logistic hubs, and what is their potential in terms of efficiency gains or environmental benefits. So here it's not so much on the spot modeling or real-time modeling that we're doing, but we're here working with different scenarios, comparing impacts, comparing the benefits also in terms of efficiency gains or environmental benefits. What can these new technologies mean for the operation of a logistic hub or logistic node? And then the last item we work on, and that brings us to the topic of today, are the new and emerging, but also the existing trade routes and networks. For instance, we look at the Arctic routes and how can we navigate on those routes? How can they, like when we navigate in the Arctic, how can it happen with respect for the ecosystems that are there, with respect for the wildlife, and how can it also happen in an efficient way and economically feasible way? We also look at the Silk Route, and especially there the focus is on the train link between Asia and Europe, and also how it connects to the European TEN-T network. And this brings us to the research that TIS is conducting with ePIcenter. So they are mapping the different opportunities and challenges this TEN-T network is facing. So what do they look at? How can digitalization boost its efficiency? How does the TEN-T network operate and is positioned within this global transport network? What are the regulatory frameworks or the relevant policies working on digitalization of this network, for instance? And how does, where are there, for instance, bottlenecks? And so this is the work that TIS is doing, and I will give the floor directly to Daniela, who will be revealing the research topics that they are already, or the research results that they have already collected until now. But let me just first just give you a short overview of the agenda. And so we started with indeed me giving a short introduction on the project. Daniela will be giving an overview on the preliminary results within the project. Then we have somebody from, Mr. Siamak Jalali from DJ Move, who will be talking about the importance of the TEN-T network and the digitalization elements. We have Mrs. Nicolette van der Jacht, who will be talking about the perspective of freight forwarders on the hinterland connectivity. And then the Port of Algeciras, Mr. Luis Nunes Vera, will be talking about experiences on data exchange and digitalization. And then we will close with questions and answers and then a roundtable discussion. So Daniela, the floor is yours. Please enlighten us with the intermediate results.
Thank you, Marjolaine. Let me start by sharing my screen. Share. Okay, sorry. Welcome, good morning. Good to see so many faces in our webinar. As Marjolaine has mentioned, the focus of today is related with enhancing the TEN-T efficiency, and we are looking forward more than sharing what we have done, because it was mainly desk research up to now. The rest is coming afterwards in terms of the analysis of the impacts in the TEN-T network. We are looking forward to hear from DG Move the work that the TEN-T coordinator for motorways of the sea has been doing in terms of digitalization, what is expected in terms of the forthcoming revision of the regulation that will be shared in few days. The perspective from the freight forwards and how digital and digital tools are enhancing and contributing to their operation, and also from Algeciras, a port that is challenged very much by the bottlenecks still persisting in terms of the rail connections to and from the port. are using the digital tools to enhance their operation. So I hope to have here a quite good number of cases to be showed and shared with all the others so that it could fit also our analysis. Let me start by just giving a brief overview on why ePIcenter and the TENTI. We are all looking for making better use of the digital solutions on transport connections. And this relates not only with the node itself, so the efficiency of the port, but especially on the port interland connections. And we know that the digital layer of the transport infrastructure is not disconnected from the physical one. And the digital one can make it the transport supply chain even more efficient than it is. The TEN-T recognizes that maritime and inland ports are important nodes. So that, and each corridor, each TEN-T core network corridor starts or ends in a port. But ports also fulfill an important role in terms of the trade development, so connecting to the outside, but also as gateways to a multimodal network of road, rails, inland waterways, multimodal platforms, and they are of extremely importance and even more relevance every day as digital hubs with significant strides for a strong digital transport infrastructure that the TEN-T aims to turn on. And the ePIcenter port nodes cover 6 of the 9 core network corridors with significant impacts on the entire network. Focusing on its 4 European ports involved, we have the Port of Antwerp as the coordinator and being connected to 3 core network corridors. The Port of Algeciras connecting the Atlantic, the starting node for the Atlantic and Mediterranean corridors. The Port of Hamburg also connecting 3 other corridors, North Sea Baltic, Orient East Med, the Scan Med, and the Port of Duisburg that connects 2 corridors, but also brings the global networks into the project as it is connected to the Silk Road and to the Arctic roads with significant number of routes crossing the port. Overall, these 4 ports handled in 2019 over 590 million tons and over 30 million TEUs that significantly impact on the network of the interland network of the TEN-T. And now coming exactly to what brings us here, we know that despite the improvements in modal connections on the side of the infrastructure, modal split of rail traffic in the interland remains low. And we have cases, for instance, the Port of Hamburg, the rail share is already close to 50%. In the Port of Antwerp, inland waterways represent nearly 40%. But overall, for the rail network, in 3 of the 4 ePIcenter projects, this share is below 20%. And digitalization has the potential to increase not only the efficiency, but also safety and environment performance. And this connects both for ports, but along all the transport logistics chain. And Marjolaine has presented a few minutes ago that we are looking for a set of digital tools that will contribute to reduce the unpredictability in port of operations, and through that to ensure a more efficient use of the transport infrastructure. We know, and this was clearly emphasized in previous webinars that we had for the project, including from the ports, the 3rd ports that are connected to the project, like the case of the Port of Montreal, that unpredictability is really a concern for the port operations. So combining efforts to provide digital solution for stakeholder coordination would certainly generate efficiency that will benefit all of the stakeholders engaged in the port activities. Also, accelerating an efficient integration of the TEN-T network with the global networks and a seamless integration in the soft layer will contribute for more secure international information flows and digitalization. The evaluation of the TEN-T regulation has clearly shown that digitalization has a huge potential to increase the efficiency of the network. And we know, over the last years, through the Connecting Europe facility and the Horizon projects, the Commission is supporting the deployment of several digital tools, and also to create harmonized rules for these tools, not only through the Digital Transport and Logistics Forum, through funding of projects like Electa or Federated, with whom ePIcenter is also liaising, so that the synergies could be maximized and avoid duplicating work that is being done by others. What we have done in the past 1 year and a half, we have started identifying a set of requirements for the different models that Marjolaine has presented in terms of the governance models, data sharing layer, increasing visibility, which are the requirements in terms of the synchromodal logistic algorithms, which are the emerging technologies that could be bring into the project, the modular containers that are being tested in the case of the Port of Algeciras, the Hyperloop, the autonomous vehicles, the Arctic route planning, but also which are the requirements that each of these main project demonstrators are requiring. Based on that, we are now starting, and this is really the part that will be the next steps of our work on the TEN-T, will be to analyze the impacts of the global networks on the land connections and how the new digital solutions that are being tested in the project will be impacting on the TEN-T infrastructure. So what we are doing, we are looking to which are the maritime connections of each of these port nodes, so the outside connectivity, which are the characteristics and the components of each of the nodes and its land connectivity. Then based on the outputs that will result from the deployment and the test of each of the solutions in the project, we'll get some KPIs for the digital layers in terms of the visibility, in terms of the optimization, in terms of the real-time monitoring that will allow us to have more traffic prediction of traffics in the network. And this will be the next steps of our work in terms of the TEN-T. So I will pass now the floor to Siamak Jalali, that will show us, bring us the insights on the TEN-T. Good morning, Siamak.
Good morning, Daniela. Can you hear me well?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, very good. I first of all would like to say good morning to you all. It's a pleasure for me to be with you. distinguished friends. My name is Siamak Jalali, and I am the advisor to the European coordinator for the Motorways of the Sea, Professor Kurt Bodevig. Many thanks for having me here. I will not be presenting any slides today, but I will give you a brief overview of our work and how it pertains to digitalization in the field of motorways of the sea and the Trans-European Transport Network policy. I will start with some figures. As we know, the Trans-European Transport Network consists of almost 300 ports, and almost 80% of all the goods are transported by sea. Almost 65% of all the cargo in EU ports is transported via short sea shipping. Before the pandemic, more than 400 million passengers traveled by sea each year. As the number of passengers has decreased a bit following the pandemic, the freight volumes have in fact increased a bit since the pandemic broke out. If we're to look at the gross weight handled by European ports each year, it amounts to almost 4 billion tons of cargo. And out of these 4 billion tons of cargo, 3/4, so 3 billion tons, constitutes hinterland traffic. Therefore, one of the main Motorways of the Sea objectives is to boost short sea shipping, but also hinterland connectivity of maritime transport, to make maritime transport more green, but also competitive vis-a-vis the other transport modes. But obviously, the attractiveness of maritime transport relies heavily on the integration of maritime and hinterland transport. And here, digitalization plays a major role. Digitalization improves and triggers improvements in shipping operations that make the sector more competitive over time. And digitalization itself will not be enough. It has to improve what we have ongoing in operations. And it is very encouraging to hear about the interesting ongoing projects and efforts in the digitalization sphere, such as the work presented by Marjolein and Daniela at the beginning of today's conference. Professor Bodevig advocates very strongly for new investments in new innovative digitalized solutions, as well as in promising alternative fuels, onshore power supply innovation in propulsion power systems, and the use of eco incentives. But we are at a point in time where all stakeholders must accelerate their efforts and must contribute, because the co-funding instruments of the European Union, they provide opportunities, but commitments are needed from member states and stakeholders, and grants will not alone be able to help us overcome all the difficulties and the paradigm shifts that we need to tackle, given the decarbonization challenge that we're facing. But there is, however, great potential in the sector to make a tangible impact on the environment, because the transport sector, as I mentioned and alluded to before, it does face major challenges. Climate change and environmental degradation are existential threats to Europe and to the world. The transport sector's greenhouse gas emissions today in the EU represent as much as 1/4 of the total emissions. And the Green Deal calls for a 90% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from transport. The Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy of the Commission, in turn, calls for a 25% increase of short sea shipping by 2030 and a 50% increase by 2050. So as we can see, we have major challenges, vast challenges ahead of us. To reach these ambitious objectives in the Green Deal, as well as in the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy, we need to reinforce our efforts. I reiterate that. This is obviously being done by projects that are ongoing, as alluded to before, but also through the TEN-T revision and other legal proposals in the Fit for 55 package this year. Within the Motorways of the Sea context, we are presenting a new work plan next summer, where we are also trying to address these challenges, because decarbonization is not only limited to alternative fuels in the transport sector, but it also includes, as I mentioned, the development and deployment of digitalized solutions in the maritime sector that improve efficiency in logistic chains. And obviously, there is no single solution to the existing challenges. There is an untapped potential here in the decarbonization in the maritime sector in general. In 2020, Professor Bodevig introduced his vision for a European maritime space in his work plan. And it is a vision of a sustainable, smart, seamless, and resilient maritime sector. It encompasses all maritime infrastructure elements and addresses the integration with the existing transport infrastructure on land, as well as the rest of the logistic chain. And here digitalization plays an important role. And I will try to expand a bit on this. So the initial vision that was presented in 2020 rests on 3 pillars. The first pillar is a sustainable European maritime space, and it addresses the objectives and priorities in the Green Deal that I mentioned before. This means continued calls also from Professor Bodevig for support of innovation and research for alternative and non-fossil fuels, as well as new engine types. Professor Bodevig strongly advocates for these investments. And this also includes, as I mentioned before, onshore power supply, but also innovations in propulsion systems, et cetera, but also investments in digitalized systems to shift more transport from the roads onto the sea. The second pillar addresses a seamless European maritime space. And here the main idea is seamless transport flows both on the sea and on land. And for this reason, it is important to develop proper hinterland connections and last mile connections. And this would in turn then improve the competitiveness of the maritime sector and help to reduce the number of trucks on the roads. Coming to the third pillar, it is the vision of a smart and interoperable European maritime space. And here digitalization is the key principle. Digitalized systems can help to make transport flows more efficient, as I mentioned earlier, and the pandemic has shown us how important it is to ensure efficient logistic chains while minimizing human interactions. Digitalization efforts have accelerated as a result since the pandemic broke out. The pandemic led to a 10% decrease in maritime transport traffic in the EU in 2020 and 2021. But it has also raised awareness about the consequences of the destruction of our environment and the vulnerability of the interconnectedness of our systems. It has led not only to an accelerated deployment of new technologies that answer the short-term problems created by the pandemic, such as digital tools to reduce in-person contact, for example, but it has also affected our approach in long-term planning. Resilience and climate change or mitigation, adaptation to address climate change are now key considerations in policymaking, as we can see in the new legal acts. And the EU's recovery plan for the pandemic, the Next Generation EU, underlines, for example, that the post-COVID Europe will need to be greener, more digital, and more resilient. So obviously this applies very strongly to the maritime sector, which has been affected significantly by the crisis. Digitalization is an essential part of any business today. It's not just in the maritime sector, but the maritime sector is an enabler of trade in this rapidly changing global economy that we have. So the sector has had to assimilate new technological developments in a timely manner to stay competitive and attractive to both business and passengers. Goods that are shipped by sea are currently mostly accompanied by digitally based customs documentation submitted through digital custom systems or maritime national single windows. But by transforming this documentation flow into an electronic format, stakeholders have and will experience obviously continuously rapid changes. The cost of business transactions must be minimized and trade is being accelerated as the costs fall for the operations. But to exploit the potential of a fully digitalized transformation, information exchanges should be done in a more harmonized and interoperable format in order to improve customs controls, efficiency, and trade administration processes. So parts of the physical infrastructure for digital services is already in place and is incorporated in the general infrastructure. But now we must focus on finding ways to accelerate the harmonization of the different systems. So these were the 3 pillars that I mentioned, but there is also a 4th pillar now that was introduced or is going to be introduced in the upcoming work plan of Professor Bodevig next summer. And it covers resilience, because again, the pandemic has changed the world significantly. Can't say that enough. The need for a more resilient maritime sector is now is not a new idea, obviously, but major challenges such as the pandemic, but also climate change, and also future exogenous shocks have increased the need for added resilience. And resilience is a broad topic, obviously, but here I would like to just mention 4 aspects that we're looking at when we're talking about the vision of a European maritime space. So the 4th pillar, which covers resilience, encourages new connections, short sea shipping connections, to enhance the transport sector's overall resilience. Short sea shipping plays a key role here in ensuring continued transport flows and goods, or of goods and people during crises. And here with digitalized systems, you will be able to quickly reroute when needed, when there is a problem somewhere in the system. Because developing these stronger short sea connections between the member states and the core network corridors will offer more alternatives in the future. So secondly, the resilience pillar would support the deployment of ICT solutions for transport. The pandemic showed us the benefits again of meeting urgent needs while minimizing human interaction. And here we see that digitalization is very pertinent. Thirdly, the resilience pillar would address how ports can maintain operations in future crises, for instance, for climate change, where infrastructure elements as breakwaters or dikes would be, something that needs to be more in the equation for future infrastructure planning and maintenance. And fourth, lastly, the resilience pillar would address the diversification of energy usage. Our transport system in Europe today relies heavily on the use of fossil fuels, and it is fundamental for us to diversify our energy usage by fostering the use of alternative fuels on board vessels and in ports, but also to reduce our environmental impact. So these are the broad strokes of our work in the maritime domain. I think I will stop there as our time is limited, but I thank you for your attention, and I hope that the information has been useful to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Siamak. Quite useful. And then afterwards, we'll have time to discuss, and if participants require any clarification, they will be welcome to do that. So now I pass the floor to Nicolette van der Jacht, from CLECAT, that will present us the perspective from the freight forwarders.
Yeah, thank you very much, Daniela. Yeah, I prepared some slides. They're not very long, but I try to highlight a bit on the maritime aspect, on the aspect of digitalization. From a forwarder's perspective, I'll quickly introduce CLECAT in the next slide. And yeah, let me also thank you indeed for giving me the floor. I wasn't very familiar with the ePIC project, but I mean, indeed, all the themes that have been introduced and the work program is very close to all the issues we are dealing with as CLECAT, because we are indeed a European organization representing freight forwarders, transport logistics companies. We're across European, and our members, they basically deal with all the modes of transport, not only in terms of as freight forwarders are not asset owners, they organize the logistics and the transport for their customers, the shippers. Of course, some of them they also own their own trucks or their own vehicles. Majority of them is asset low, and in that sense they tend to be sort of mode neutral. For us, of course, then still infrastructure, the physical part of infrastructure is very important in order to operate along Europe, but also across Europe in the most efficient way. But equally, I mean, on top of the physical infrastructure, we need indeed sort of the information, the data elements of the transport, and therefore digitalization, but also decarbonization is on top of our priorities. Yeah, we are indeed sort of a Brussels-based organization. Our main goals is indeed some sort of advocacy of policymakers and to provide that sort of information on in terms of how logistics is working and what the needs is for logistics. Yeah, maybe as the next slide. Yeah, I will give a little bit in view of the project, give our view on why we believe that European seaports are critical for TEN-T, but also for the overall resilient transport system. Of course, we've always been supporting the TEN-T. We've done that in sort of joint collaboration with other European stakeholders, with the seaport, with ESPO, with the terminal operators, with actually all stakeholders. I mean, I think it's more than obvious that a very sound and sort of infrastructure in Europe, and also having the finances for that, the funding is extremely important. So we always be supporting the timelines for the core and for the core network for 2030, but also the comprehensive network. Of course, there's now the updating and the revision has been very important in order to make it sort of align it with the smart and sustainable digital framework and then sort of the EU. So yeah, next objective have been to green that TEN-T network and to also provide the necessary infrastructure for alternative fuels. We very much supported the recent regulation for AFIR for alternative fuels infrastructure at that TEN-T network, having that every 100 or potentially shorter periods within the TEN-T networks. Obviously, last mile is also for us a priority, making sure that there's the good infrastructure coming out of the port to allow for multimodal transport. Yeah, as I said, the digitalisation remains incredibly important. And indeed, well, yeah, the communication across all those modes of transport. I agree with previous speakers that indeed sort of the COVID crisis has given a boost to digitalisation and digital transition in transport and logistics. It shows that digitalization can be seen as a tool in managing important parts during the crisis. Maybe as a point here, I think it's important to say whereas digitalization has been boosting it, also I will come to that, the platformization. For forwarders, we would continue to say that the human element has also proved to be extremely important during this crisis. Finding solutions, and that's in particular the job of the forwarders, to find sort of alternatives in case that ports or infrastructure, well, we haven't seen, luckily the ports have never been closed over the last 2 years, but there have been bottlenecks. There have been a lot of times where our members have had to rebook, find alternative solutions. When there have been border closings or other major problems. Let me say a few words on why we believe that the seaports are critical for a resilient transport system, and I'll show that with the next slide. Yeah, I would, and then of course the previous speaker has been very much focusing from the Commission on the short sea shipping part. For this, of course, they import and export their goods from in a global environment. So they use a lot of container shipping. And over the last, well, I'm sure everybody's familiar with that, reliability in the global shipping supply chains have been at an all-time low level. I think it has been up to 33%. So this has been and continues to be a major problem. Today's maritime logistics supply chains are major disrupted. So, well, this of course if you go to the next slide, This has been, over the last year, been really on the top of our agendas. We've seen, of course, the trigger has been, no doubt, the pandemic. The pandemic caused reduced port productivity, caused by ships waiting outside ports, slow ship to turn around when finding berths. And we've seen disrupted schedule reliability and sailings due to, well, and particularly early in the crisis, blank sailings and vessel sliding, which completely blown up times of arrival, but also departure. So, well, you may wonder what has this to do? What has it to do with sort of the problems we discussed today? Maybe in a way, it is a problem because it needs to be questioned whether the ultra-large container vessels, which may be good for the customer in the sense that it reduces sort of the cost per box, they are also adding cost to the rest of the supply chain, in particular to ports, to the infrastructure of the ports, to the terminal operations, and probably also to the hinterland connections, as they need huge upgrades in terms of the infrastructure needs for rail, for inland waterways, etc. We see today a lot of congestion also within the ports. We see disruptions. We see longer also for our members. There's a lot of complaints about the catch and demurrage. And when you have those very short areas of time for free times within the ports, everybody wants to move out a container as soon as possible. So we also believe that this short free zone times within the ports has a negative impact on modal shift, which normally needs a bit more time for bringing containers to the rail sidings within the port, to terminals for inland waterways. So we're looking at this development with quite a critical eye. Next slide. So yeah, this was already sort of alerted to this. Yeah, we're a little bit concerned that by also the hinterland issues caused now by congestion and by the disencouragement of modal shift caused by the detention and demurrage charges. Yeah, that's the next slide. So yeah, this is actually, I brought this quickly, this quote on the slide, because it was said by one of our members last week when we had an event, and actually what's currently happening, the impact of indeed further digitalization, and what we really see today on the ground, which is that today our members are not really well informed when they can discharge their imported container within a port. They do not receive the alert from the carriers. Well, I don't want really to finger point here, but it's just sort of the reality today is that there's a lot of lost time because people do not know when their container is available for when the container is available in the terminal. Yeah, so in an ideal scenario, freight forwarder would be informed about the discharge and availability of an imported container 5 days prior to its availability in the terminal. And this would allow optimal planning, whilst avoiding a situation where an itinerary would have to be cancelled and replanned over and over again. And that's indeed the situation where we're being faced with really in today's situation. Well, of course, we've been discussing the situation with colleagues from DG Move and also from DG Competition, and indeed what they tell us is that all actors in the maritime and logistics chain need to reflect on how to increase the resilience of door-to-door international container transport and better prepare to cope with it in terms of future disturbances. And then they tell us, well, for example, digital tools could be better exploited to share information in real time on the position of destination of cargo and the availability of infrastructure and equipment. And they could further help in organizing operations and revising planning in case of unforeseen events. Well, indeed, of course, we do appreciate that this should be sort of the ideal situation, but this requires a lot of sort of new trust. But also today, it is not happening. So yeah, probably the project is alerting to this sort of visibility, the need for transparency. And indeed, this is something which is very high on our agenda. Yeah, let me move to the next point. Indeed, I want to say a few things on our work on digitalization. This, of course, the whole idea of digitalization is very broad. It's about master data, it's about operational data, it's about new ways of work and expectations in terms of indeed, simplicity sharing of data, sharing of information. And we see on the infrastructure itself the need for sort of connectivity. And we talk about platforms, open data, secure and trusted data. But then, of course, why do we need this? What is the aim for digitalization, which can as such never be sort of an aim in itself? And we need the digitalization to improve safety and security, to reduce emissions if possible, process optimization and better customer service. Yes, the next slide. I wanted also to say a few words, and I know that this has been TIS has been looking at this, the work on the DTLF. I think it's important also that this aligns with sort of the project, and I'm sure that it does. The vision there has been all from the beginning to ensure an efficient electronic exchange of information along business to government, government to business, but equally business to business. From our perspective, we achieved one important aim, which is to no longer talk about the exchange of transport information documents, but to talk about the exchange of transport information. And we've been working very closely in on the implementation of the FT regulation, the Electronic Freight Transport Information Regulation, which is now being worked on in the new DTLF. That's the DTLF we started in 2018 up to 2023. But equally important, and that probably aligns more with this project, is the courier cargo information systems and the work on the what is called the federated platforms. Yeah, maybe the next. Why is this so important? Yeah, as I said, the digitization is not a goal in itself. It should sort of improve efficiency as a goal. Maybe let me also say that we've talked in the past a lot about single platforms and central solutions. We're quite pleased that DG Move and sort of the DTLS have moved from that perspective more towards the idea of a distributed and federated platforms, which we think are more future-proof. It's the idea that's already there today, a lot of platforms, and once they can be able to connect to each other, there's no need to reinvent the wheel or to do everything again, or to as long as sort of the data is harmonized and that we can work with neutral data, and that again also maybe the technological is neutral, that we don't need to work with one single solution, but if we can sort of work with their own solutions as long as they can interconnect and be part of that federated solution, that's fine. Where do we maybe get in a little bit more critical, and our members may have problems, and then I come again back to maybe the point of a forwarder perspective, and that has to do maybe with the data ownership. If you look at sort of international freight forwarders, and whether they're big or whether they're small, they own door-to-door supply chain data. And when they are considering data exchange, the safety and the ownership of that data is essential. You have those very big freight forwarders, the DHLs, the Kuehne and Nagels of this world. They mostly own and operate their own visibility platforms, the proprietary platforms to share the data within their own networks. And clearly, they're smaller entities that do not have their own networks, and meaning that their transport management system are not able to interact with each other. So they need to connect then with other platforms, maybe with port community systems. Of course, they do use a lot of port community systems. The problem there is that some of these port community systems, they do not connect with each other. So basically what they need is these community systems not operating in silos, but they require those companies to connect with local interfaces, which for the moment again is often not possible. So what we require, our members require, is something, a neutral platform of platforms, preferably at an international level. And that's something we are working together on, together with our international organization FIATA, which is working on a digitally connected ecosystem aimed at allowing its members to connect and exchange data whilst remaining in full control of that data. I think there's one more slide. Okay, well, this is basically again, elaborating a little bit on what the DTLF is doing in terms of its various subgroups and the regulation on the electronic freight transport information. Of course, we've been also very closely working on the EU single window initiatives, being whether the customs single window or the maritime single window. Sometimes they're being confused. I don't think they have a lot to do with each other. Maritime single window is maybe for us a bit less relevant because that's more to do with sort of the ship and the maritime part. Whereas the customs single window is really key for us because it opens a lot of opportunities for forwarders and indeed customs agents. Well, maybe this triggered some questions and some debate. I think this was my last slide. Okay, sorry, there's one more. Yeah, well, this is actually a slide which I've used from Covestro, which is a shipper, but this very much fits with the need that not only shippers have, but also forwarders in terms of punctuality. This also links with another European project called ELETA. ELETA has been working on rail freight punctualities, not only looking at sort of when does a freight train arrive, but also when has it arrived, and seeking to produce information on what are the root causes for delays. In order then, if you know why there has been delays, why containers are arriving late, and with this some sort of trigger alarm points. If you know, you don't need to know all information, you just need to know the information when you have delays. Of course, I'm talking now about the rail freight side, but it can also also be relevant for sort of a container in case of delays, and we've been working on similar projects with the International Transport Forum. But again, pointing out, and I think this KPIs are very relevant, not only for shippers, but also for forwarders, as sort of measurement would then include delay causes for container shipments, whether in intermodal transport or by what other means of transport. So yeah, if you have time, I think I will close here. And yeah, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Nicolette. Quite interesting facts. We'll come back, and we have already one question after to you after the presentation from Luis from the Port of Algeciras. That I'm pleased to have it on this forum, and also a member of my Atlantic corridor, and also from the Mediterranean one. So, Luis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Daniela. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Lucas and Daniela to come with us in order to explain you our approach of how digitalization and innovation could boost the logistics chain in the port, in the maritime sector side, and later in the railway, in order to make it a multimodal, intermodal way of moving freight. At the same time, I would like to bring your attention on one issue. Now that we are facing the new TNT regulation, we feel that it's needed to pay special attention to align it with the Green Deal ambitions, the new Fit for 55, and to assess properly the measures that are proposed in the Fit for 55, in order not to lose the content or the importance of the TNT regulation, because these measures will distort the current market. So from one side we are regulating how freight will have to be moved in a sustainable way, smart way, resilient, and so. But at the same time, we are proposing measures that we have no doubt that are in a good sense, but may distort the current market. So the TNT regulation will be regulating something that will be changed by other measures, that are looking for a good objective, and this is to reduce the emissions, I refer in the EDS concretely, but for the Port of Algeciras is an issue, and we could change our own strategy, our mentality regarding the innovation and so on, because it could affect our current status and position in the European supply chain. Once I have said this, I will I will try to do my best with the presentation I have prepared. We are going to go through our Algeciras digital innovation strategy, focus on the maritime side, but later we will see how we are making efforts in order to improve our railway infrastructure in the last mile, and how we will, like with other projects like the rolling motorway, to complete all the picture, with the hinterland and the maritime side. How with these new tools, digitalization, the blockchain, and so on, we could make it more efficiency and reduce either time and offer to our clients the best way to for moving their goods. Okay, I will go through the presentation. Give me just a second. Please let me know if you do you see me?
You need to change the presentation.
Okay.
Swap it.
Okay.
In the opções de apresentação,
Let's see. No?
that's good now.
Okay. So let's start. Okay, this is the Algeciras for Digital Innovation Strategy that we will go now through the different, let's see. Okay, our roadmap, no? Which is the industry context and may change over. So here we will analyze what are our clients demanding, what are our new challenges, what are we looking for in order to improve the supply chain. Later, we will go through the importance of the Algeciras port because of its location in the around world route, no, with zero deviation, and how the transshipment is fostering the import-export as well, no, because we cannot understand one without the other. Then how Algeciras port is evolving, no, what are our main process in order to apply new technologies, improve the efficiency and to complete the wheel. What is Algeciras port digital ambition? Later, what are we currently doing? Finally, our next steps. And here we'll show you a bit of a rolling motorway that is our one of our main projects in our strategy in order to put the track on tracks, if you permit the joke. So we will try to remove from road the lorries and trucks and put into the train. And so with that project, we will reduce emissions. Okay. Which is the core industry context and main changeovers? Well, information technology is performing the port and the shipping industry. Maybe the innovation is going faster than the capacity that we have to apply, but we are on it. So, what is the adoption of the digital technology? In a first stage, we see that the digital impact primarily in operation and cost reductions, but was a very limited digital disruption. And now in stage 2, we are through digital platforms, no, for cooperation and to share information and data exchange. We are having a digital engagement with our customers, no, increasingly, and it's increasingly important, no. It's increasing the personalization of the customer experience using advanced data analytics. And the first stage is the next step. The next step is advanced technologies and data analytics, constantly deployed to find competitive advantages. Digital technology will best improve the customer experience and enable next level of optimization of operations. Transport and logistics lagging behind, processes manual and poorly digitalized. What? Sorry. So what do we mean with this? No? What we are looking for is to change the perception that the customer has of our port, no? And the transport logistics, where we are trying to offer them the maximum information about the state of their goods, how it is moved in the port. The digital forces are transforming the port and shipping industry. So we have the e-commerce platforms where they are trying to give maximum information about what is the status of your goods. We have the automation and autonomous terminals fully operated automatically. We have autonomous, we are in ePIcenter. We will try to have a first electric autonomous truck in order to move in the port, no, the freight. And finally, artificial intelligence. that we are going to try to apply it to learn about each operation in order to improve the operations each time. No, it is repeated. So the cost of marketing transport, we have realized that the cost of physically moving a container is less than the cost of handling information related to its transport. Now we have realized that you can automate the movement in the terminal, the cranes, the horizontal movement, but what you cannot easily handling is the information. No, and we need platforms in order to boost the interaction between all the relevant authorities, and we have to avoid wasting time due to the lack of communication. No, sometimes the missing point, or the point where there is no problem, is with the shipping information pipeline. No, so once we have everything done, to share it with all the affected parts. So what are our challenges? Well, for authorities, as authority for the need to enrich for collaboration. So that is our main objective for now, no? Enterprise to enterprise visibility and better planning. From the side of port terminals, we are looking for a better planning, increased assets and staff utilization. From the side of vessel service providers, better planning as well, increased assets and staff utilization. Finally, as you know, port terminals are vessel service providers, and sometimes are the same company. Agents, proactivity on port cost, visibility and predictability. Nautical service provider, better planning. Customs and other authorities, better information sharing and less manual paperwork. This is one of our main battles now, because in Spain at least, we have several ministries working in the same area with different ways of communication, different platforms. They are still a bit obsolete in that issue. No? They are still depending a lot of paperwork. So we are working with them in order to add them to our port collaboration system. No? And finally, intermodal and landside platform, that as I was telling you before, no, we are trying to improve our assets and the planning, and trying to give real-time access to E2E supply chains events for shipment. You know? And once we have that side, to apply as well for the railway model. What we have realized, it's that still now, in 2019, the economists was telling us in the age of personal connectivity, smartphones and PDS, an age-old question still is supply chain managers. Where is my stuff? So now we are trying to answer this question as fast as possible and using the technology that we have already. Only 6% of companies have complete visibility of the supply chains. So there is a lot to do in this aspect. And that is why we try to change this conception of the port, as a black hole, where you know when the goods or freights are coming in, but you don't know when are going to go out and where and how. So efficiency has to be improved through the transparency, the coordination, and reducing the inefficiencies within the supply chain, either time, wasted time, lack of coordination with the partners and the relevant authorities. That is why real-time information and prediction and visibility and predictability is so important. Why are the support is so important? Well, that is what we think is very important. It's just a positioning. We have a value proposition, quality of service at a strategic location in the state of Gibraltar. So we give you completeness, connectivity, and reliability. This is our presentation. We are the first port of Spain, the fourth port of Europe, In the Mediterranean as well, we are in the first positions with Tanger and Valencia. We are facing several, we are working in several sectors. We are not only focused on container ship, but we at the same time we are moving 6 million passengers. In Roro, we have 3,800 trucks. In total freight, we have 110 million of tons. Also, they are our figures. I will give you a video, a short video in order to present our point. Sorry. So, how are we evolving? Our mission of supporting global logistics, aside the cargo flow, logistics chain, supporting trade and creating value. So there are many players involved with complex operation and exchange of information. That is where we have to try our best in order to improve this exchange of information and make all the operation fluent. The evolving role of UPA is the facilitator and orchestrator. So from being a landlord, where we only just give the land and the regulation for the use of it and the client and the services how to be done, we are now trying to make it easier for everybody, from landlord, regulator, operator to upload the ecosystem of orchestration, digitalisation to business management and digital mission. So with more data and well managed, we could give a better service to our clients. Our digital ambition, okay, Algeciras next generation pole, it's like the pit stop concept and philosophy, As you know, in Formula One, when the car stops, it has to be coordinated and fast as possible in order to continue in the race. So that is our main set for the ship when are coming and the freights and the movement inside the port. All the players working as a team. Vessel is the Formula One car and the operational environment. It's in our main most important thing for us. Intelligence, intermodal, and green. Why we think this? Because data innovation, operational integration, and energy and carbon neutral. And we think that with innovation and the efficiency is the best way to get to a greener and sustainable way of moving goods.
Sorry, Luis, can you accelerate a bit? Because we are ready with few time and we would like to have an exchange of ideas.
Okay, this is, I will go through this faster. now we are working the digital control tower concept to orchestrate the workflow ecosystem, where we are going to implement step by step the different areas, no, the railway, the data time, the cheaper call, etc. Now we will be an enabler for all of these activities. Let me go faster. I don't want to bore you, because I want to go to the final part of the presentation. Well, this is the digital control tower, as I told you, how it works. This stone, the different platforms we are using in order to coordinate the different actors. This is the reality. And then finally, our two projects, the motorway that we have the opportunity to present you, introduce it in the Atlantic Corridor Forum, the rolling motorway, in order to reduce the emissions of the transport mode. That the main transport mode that we have to have our goods outside the port is the truck. So with the rail transport, we will try with the motorway to reduce in a big way the emissions. Finally, well, this is all of the rolling motorway. Finally, well, we got after 2020, where we are going to improve the railway connection with the port facility located in Algeciras. So now we are acting, designing new infrastructure in order to improve the last mile that it was said before, Because first of all, it's the infrastructure and then the digital infrastructure, But first of all, we need to improve the railway connection. And that was all. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't bore you, and I hope you find it interesting.
Thank you, Luis. Quite interesting, and I took note particularly of the figures that you point out on the problems, that 50%, 57% due to poor coordination, 50% related with transparency, and 37% related with inefficiency within the supply chain. So I want to believe that a large part of the tools and the solutions that we are developing in ePIcenter and testing in ePIcenter will contribute through the better visualization, better predictability, better exchange along all the supply chain, would contribute to reduce these figures in some amount, so that we are all contributing to turn the supply chain more efficient. We have just one question in the chat that is targeted to Nicolette, and is from our partner Julian, that asked that regarding the requirement to know the availability of a container 5 days in advance, if you could please summarize the planning process that would occur during those 5 days. This means, how are these 5 days used to optimize transport? Could any of these processes be made faster with automated data exchange or automated logistics planning systems?
Thank you for the question, Daniela. Well, I'm not a forwarder, but this is from a practical operation point, of course. Obviously, a forwarder doing merchant haulage, that means that he needs to organize the land transport. He needs to start planning to book or the haulier, to make sure that he's on time. That's asked for planning. Some of that may indeed be done by whatever tools, depending a little bit on what mode of transport he would use. But again, as I said, I think the human element in terms of the planning of the forwarder, there is still a lot of some of the bookings with the hinterland operations cannot, of course, be done in you need electronic means, but the human element is still very important. and to be honest, I'm maybe it could have been 4 days as well, but this was the number of days that were mentioned, and in particular that sort of really conflicts what we see today when there's no indication at all. Sometimes the container already arrived and the forward is not aware of it. So this causes major disruptions and delays. Of course, also with road haulage, you need to book your slots. There is sort of a shortage of drivers. There's maybe the time will be different when there's less. When there are more availabilities of the handling capacities. But for the moment, yeah.
Thank you, Nicolette. Yeah, Nicolette. There is another one from Marjolaine. How do you see the implementation of this distributed and federated data sharing? When do you think this way of exchanging data will be a reality? I suppose it's also to Nicolette. Yeah.
Yeah.
One confirms.
That's also a good question. I don't think we will see it's I think it will be implemented incrementally. So it's not a one-stop shop. I think slowly we will see a move towards this federated data sharing. For example, now we already have some pilots working on the ECMR. That is for the road sector. Ultimately, also when we have FT, it doesn't really matter what mode of transport we're dealing with. So now, I think that we need at least another 5 years to have this federated data sharing, and it will sort of be yeah, it's not a solution that is going to be there from one day to another. I think there's now also within the DTLF there's good understanding of it. It's I think there maybe there's also maybe a bit more need for guarantees of this data sovereignty. On the ownership of data, in particular from our side. Probably we also need a bit more testing on it, more projects. Yeah, also to sort of better understanding how these platforms function. For example, maybe it works for now to some extent already in the air freight sector, where we have, I don't know whether you heard about it, it's IATA's One Record project. It's not really a project because they really start operating on it. Yeah, it is basically working on the concept of APIs to allow also economic operators to familiarize themselves with it. And whether it's air freight or what other modes of transport, I think that the economics operators, they in the end they will need to connect between themselves with sort of the APIs concept.
Before going to the question from Lucas, that is general to all, I think we can. I would like to hear from Tiamak in the Commission on whether the forthcoming revision of the regulation would bring more requirements and provisions in related to this digital layer, not only for the maritime and multimodal connectivity, whether this will be in addition to the single windows that were already presented in the previous version of the regulation, whether in the new one we'll have more provisions related to the digital layer.
Thank you for the question. Unfortunately, I am strictly advised to not reveal anything about the contents of the regulation as such. and I cannot really comment on it. And as you know, it will be presented next week. But what I can say is that the ambition is, of course, the overall ambition is to make the whole network more green and more efficient. So with that said, there will be, the appropriate references to other legal acts and other standards that may have been updated since the adoption of the last regulation in 2013. But as such, I decline to comment on what we are putting forward in the field of digitalization and increased provisions for member states to fulfill in that field.
Thank you, Siamak. Yeah, I suppose I understand. It was just to get an overview of, but it's clear that some more focus on the digital layer will be presented in the regulation. So I will come to the question that Lucas has raised. That is a question to all of our speakers. How can we improve cooperation among the various stakeholders and actors in the supply chain, including Commission, including port authorities, including freight forwards, including rail operators and road operators, to ensure more seamless port interland collections and improve data sharing? Does any of you would like to start?
I can start if it's okay, because I suspect that my answer will be shorter than the others. First of all, I'm still quite new in this context, but what I do know is that obviously we are in favor of any kind of commitment and joint efforts in this regard. There are some projects ongoing already, Horizon Europe projects, but also Connecting Europe facility projects where industry stakeholders and public stakeholders get together. I know that in the road sector for ITS, for instance, there have been projects where the stakeholders from different parts of society have come together, academia, producers of vehicles, and then authorities have come together to make sure that the standardization and the rollout and deployment can take place at an accelerated pace. Obviously, we're in favor of that, and we support those kinds of actions. Now, the coordinator, in this case, for the motorways of the sea, he does not, his position is not necessarily the position of the European Commission, because he is the coordinator and his work is to facilitate. So when he calls for additional support for digitalized solution, as I alluded to in my intervention, it is exactly that he calls upon the Commission to actually make sure that there are funds available in future calls for proposals in the Connecting Europe facility or through other funding instruments to allow for these kinds of projects where stakeholders from different parts of society can come together, so that also the developers can have a direct contact point with the end users, and that the regulators in this case are part of the process, so that what is being designed and what is being proposed in a legal act is close to reality and the needs on the ground, rather than something that is far away from the operations on the ground and not applicable really in real life. So I mean, that is how we can improve cooperation among various stakeholders. That would be my short answer. Yeah.
Thank you, Siamak. Luis, you would.
Yeah, just to say that I think that, for example, this initiative of the ePIcenter, as a live toolkit, could help to improve data sharing. And if from the Commission, we can set a standard, in order to develop a common way to share this information, between, among other ports, among other countries, will help in order to boost the supply chain, to improve the efficiency of this logistics. At the same time, I think that for sure, the regulation, the new regulation, is going to focus on the Green Deal, and it's going to take into account the new challenges of the climatic change and the climatic resilience. But we don't have to forget that sustainability has three phases. No, one is for sure the climatic one, no, environmentally. Another one has to be with the economical side and social. And we cannot forget that sustainability is about to continue growing without affecting the future of our next generations. No, so I think that the Commission, no, the European Commission, with the hand of the authorities and business developers, the private sector, has to have a quorum, no, in order to take these platforms developed in a way that could be used by everybody. That's all. Thank you.
Nicolette, I don't know if you still want to raise something, but I have one question to you that is related with one of your comments on the regional imbalance of containers and how this is impacting on the chain. And one of the solutions that is being tested in the ePIcenter project or being studied exactly in the with the terminals of Algeciras is the connectainer, so modular containers that could be coupled and uncoupled with support from digital tools that would bring in a very fast way a new code to a container that could be two containers from 20 merged into one of 40 or vice versa. And this coding and this process is quite simple. If this kind of solutions would be something that would bring more added value to the freight forwarders. And after I have one question that came here from Jesus, that is in fact our partner in charge of this connectainer, that is asking the Commission whether in the case of new technologies that can bring benefits to the logistic chain, whether the Commission will be in the position to face modifications in the regulations to facilitate or to promote the uptake of this kind of innovative solutions. So, Nicolette?
Yes, thank you. Maybe I need to learn a little bit more about what a modular container is, because do they operate in international global supply chains, or is this for short sea?
Lucas, maybe you can unmute Jesus. Jesus, that is our partner that is in charge of the connectainer, so he could present it you very, very briefly in a more accurate way than me.
Jesus, you can unmute yourself.
Yes. Hello. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are hearing you.
Okay. First of all, good morning to all of you. Well, we have developed a new way of matching or using the containers. Okay? We have developed a container that you can be used as 20 feet or 40 feet. We have made with a simple operation, you can connect or disconnect our container. Okay, so this is a way to reduce the container imbalance. You all know. I will explain briefly. Okay, you all knew that the use of the container depends of the commodity. The commodity marks which containers can be used, 20 or 40 feet. So in our case, we have made that the container can be adapted to the commodity in order to have the possibility of having 20 feet. But if you need 40 feet, you can join two containers of 20 feet and you have a container ready for your car. Okay, so this is in a very quick way how our container acts. There are two questions. One, the question that asked Daniel about the impact for the forwarders in this case. After our study is that you will have always equipment available because of the shipping lines don't have to move empty containers to cover the cargo. I mean, you can have always equipment available for your cargos in the moment. And my question was that how this new way of using the containers could be adapted to the current regulations, because of okay, we have tried to adapt our container to the current regulation, to the current standards, but maybe could be something that that should be implemented by the administration. So how the European Commission could help these new developments to be put in the market. I don't know if I have clarified your doubt, Nicole.
Well, yeah, thank you. In a commercial, this is of course commercial topic, I think. The carriers own the containers, or they lease them. Of course, this is huge. It has been over the pandemic a huge shortage of containers. So I mean, that's being produced, they're being bought. The same with, of course, ships. There's been a lot of container ships being on order and capacity. So no doubt there's a need for more capacity, and whether something more flexible will appear fine, because we've seen also a lot of moving empty containers. This is empty space, in particular to move them to areas where maybe the freight is higher. So I find this, well, for me it's still quite abstract what you're telling. But in particular because today, in today's liner shipping market, containers are owned again, they're branded. So I do not really see how this would how this would be brought to the market. But I have more questions than answers, but I will be willing and happy to learn more about it. Maybe someone else from the audience would be willing to comment on it.
I can jump in, Nicolette, if I may. I mean, the thing is, as the question by Jesus, you addressed me there. I cannot really answer. If I understood your question correctly, is if the Commission is in the position to modify existing regulations to allow for modular containers. I mean, I'm not really in a position to say. I work at directorate in a unit responsible for transport networks, so the infrastructure and the infrastructure requirements. So we don't regulate the the standards for vessels and for movements of mobile assets. So I'm sorry, I cannot really answer, but yeah, that's all I can say at the moment.
But maybe I could just complete what Siamak was saying, that in fact it's not up to the Commission to regulate these kind of things. What Commission is doing is to facilitate its testing and its deployment. And what we are doing here in this Horizon project is to do a pilot case to test that could be afterwards through the Connecting Europe facility, for instance, or through EIB or whatever the funding scheme, be deployed on large scale. That is the path for the uptake of this kind of solutions, to test in a small scale in a research project, and then to, if this is promising, then it can get further support in other funding lines for large scale deployment. We are really reaching the end. We have already exceeded in 10 minutes the time schedule, but there is a question for Marjolaine that I think that it could be our wrap-up question. Should data sharing be made mandatory or made obligatory in the new policy provisions? considering that we have a lot of incentives to accelerate the implementation of tools to improve transparency and optimization, but often we get stuck in the availability of data and willingness to share. Does any of you would like to comment this?
Yeah, maybe. I think that there's per definition data sharing, but I think in the future it would be good to work with, since people have the FT regulation, that will probably accelerate data sharing, because you would have the data on the transport information. Maybe what at some point may help is indeed that you have this European data sharing architecture, which is a sort of the network of the platforms. And this would then allow the economic operators to exchange data amongst themselves only once. So yeah, data sharing per definition, but ultimately I think the use of the standard, the common, the federated architecture would facilitate it. But then of course you need to have some basic acceptance of the standards. You have basic trust and a number of basic conditions that need to be met in terms of that, the security of the data. That data does not sort of be shared to anyone, but only to those on a need-to-know basis.
Thank you. Well, I think we have to stop now because we have already exceeded the time in 15 minutes. It was a very interesting morning. I took particular note that we are on the track, we are progressing, and we are aligned with the overall goals related with continuing efforts in terms of standardization, in terms of data sharing, creating more visibility, more transparency along the supply chain. So we hope that in few months with our project ongoing, we could start having results that could be shared and could be used to analyze really the impacts on the TEN-T network. In the meanwhile, the discussion on the revision would start to be public. We'll have more insights on that. Thank you for your participation. We'll share afterwards through the project newsletter the results of this webinar. I don't know if Marjolaine, as coordinator, if you want to say something else.
No, I would like to thank, of course, all the participants to join this session and the speakers for their presentations, of course. It's very valuable information for us, which we can definitely use for the further research we're conducting. So thank you a lot, and yeah, thank you, and see you next time.
Thank you all for your participation, and particularly naturally our speakers for their time and their willingness to share with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Bye.